But today we're going to talk about it's something that you may never have to fully think about, depending on what you do with your photography. But it's important that you understand how this works, especially if you are at all concerned about the quality of the photographs that you produce, or if you planned to do photography in a sort of a professional capacity. It's important that you understand digital compression and at least have a basic understanding of how it works, why it works, and what your options are when it comes to it. So like it says right up here, what is digital compression? And by the way, this is just like a 3-slide slideshow. I'll post it along with the video when I get it done onto Google Classroom. Digital compression is, simply put, a method of reducing the number of bits, those ones and zeros that go into the code of a digital file, by using mathematical algorithms to eliminate redundant information. And that compression can be either lossy or lossless. We'll talk about what those terms mean in a moment. So compression. Compression is a means of taking a file. It could be an image file, it could be a video file, a sound file, a text file, what have you, and reducing the size of it so that it can be stored on whatever device or in the cloud, what have you, without taking up a huge amount of space. And that's done so by removing, I won't say removing yet, reducing the amount of information it takes to store that file. All right, so there's lossy compression. Lossy compression is going to take, in our case, we're talking about photographs here. All right, so we'll stick with that, image files. It removes some of the data that you're not immediately going to notice with your human eyes. It'll do things like, it'll say, all right, there's this pixel here in the image, and then, I don't know, it's, let's say, green. And then over here, maybe 12 pixels away, there's a darker green, and in between, there's like a gradient of greens that gets you from that green to that dark green. And so the lossy file will say, well, all those pixels in between, let's just go ahead and take those out. You're not going to notice those right away if I pull this back up. And it'll do stuff like that, all right? And it does that in order to lower the quality to decrease the file size. One of the downfalls to a lossy file format is that it will not allow you to restore that file to its original format. You'll never be able to see how it originally looked straight out of the camera ever again if it's saved as a lossy file format. So what happens with a lossy file is whatever program you use to open that file, it's going to make guesses. I put guesses in quotation marks because it's got some sort of mathematical algorithm that it's going to use to figure out what it should put in to fill in the gaps in the data so that you can view it. And then when you close it, that same program is going to compress that file again. And when it does so, it may actually remove even more data than had originally been removed from it. So, and I put a little extra note, in the case of like an image that you view on social media, for example, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, what have you, the reduction in quality can become quite pronounced because those photos are being looked at hundreds, if not thousands, if not millions of times. And each time somebody looks at a photo, right, their app that they're using, the website that they're using, makes guesses as to how to fill in all the gaps in data. And then when you leave that photo behind, it compresses it down again and puts it away. And so if you ever want to see this happening for yourself, go back to like your oldest photo in whatever social media platform you like is, download that photo from the website, and then zoom in really tightly on it. And you'll see everything will look really weird and blocky. The colors will seem off when you get close, but then you zoom out, the thing still looks fine. Lossy formats, despite the downfalls, like the fact that you can never restore it to its original format, we would not have the internet that we have today if it wasn't for lossy formats. They are necessary because they reduce the amount of data so much. Otherwise, every time you opened a website and it had a picture on it, it would be like the old dial-up days back in the 90s when it would take that image like a minute or two to upload, right? The internet thrives right now on lossy formats. Some image lossy formats are JPEGs. I put that one in red because that's what we use mostly. And all these different file formats were developed by some company or some group, and the JPEG is so called because the people that developed it were the Joint Photographic Experts Group. GIF, you're familiar with GIFs because they can be animated, so any little animated picture you've ever seen is a GIF. But those are very lossy, because they can store multiple images that can be played on a loop. They need to really reduce the quality of each one. And WebP is like this new lossy format that Google's trying to push. People don't seem to be quite going for it just yet. But WebP claims to be able to reduce the image to an even smaller file form or file size rather than JPEG, while having a better overall quality than JPEG. But nobody's quite going for it yet. Like I've never seen a camera that takes pictures in WebP. But like there are other, like in video, there's MP4. That's the file format that just about every single YouTube video is going to be in. Pretty much anything that you stream. If you're watching something on Netflix, you're watching an MP4. MP3s are lossy files that are sound files. And each time you open an MP3 to listen to it, your whatever device you're using makes guesses as to how to fill in the gaps in the data. Then there's lossless compression. And lossless compression does not remove data in the original file. Now that's technically not true because it's going to do a similar thing. It's going to remove pixels in order to make the file size a little smaller, but it's going to add in some code that says that lets the program that's opening it know what to fill those in with. But it's done in a shorthand. But as a result, there's no sacrifice of quality. It will always look just as good as it did the first time you opened it. And this is what I was just talking about. Since there's data that gets included within the file's code to tell the program how to fill in the gaps, the file sizes are much larger than lossless. We'll take a look and you'll see just what a huge difference there is. Some lossless image formats. There's RAW. A RAW image. Some cameras will use RAW as their file format because it's just a completely and utterly uncompressed. No compression has been done to it. But a lot of cameras won't. A lot of cameras will use either a PNG or JPEG as a lossy file because you're having to save onto an SD card. And if all your images were in RAW, you'd fill up an SD card very quickly because those are huge file formats. PNG, I put in red because it's one that I often suggest that if you want to save your images either because you're going to send them off to a printer, or you have someone who's requesting images from you and you want them to look good, or you just want to make sure you've got one version of your photograph that's going to always look good no matter what. A ping is the way to go. That was developed by the Portable Network Graphics. And then a TIFF is also not a bad one, but that's going to be a really big file size too. It's not as big as RAW. RAW files are gigantic. TIFF comes pretty close. TIFF is really loved by graphic designers. Graphic designers who are designing using vectors so that everything that they make looks smooth. But now they got to send it off to a printer, and the printer needs it to be in a bitmap or a raster format. That just means a format that uses pixels. So a lot of graphic designers will ship it off as a TIFF to a printer who says we need a pixel image, because TIFF contains so much information, although nowhere near as much as RAW, that it will still look nice and smooth. All right, so you're thinking, well, why should I care? Well, here's something we'll give a look here. So I got this image. This is one from the photographs that I showed in the that post that I did on the blog. I just want to, yeah, that's what I want to do. All right, and this first one is a ping. And at this distance, we can't tell that much difference between it, and I swear I just switched this over to a JPEG. But this JPEG hasn't been opened a ton of times. I opened and closed and changed up the quality, and eventually, I promise I just switched it again, I've got this image, which is also a JPEG, but it's one that's been messed with and opened and shut and things of that nature. But again, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference from this distance. This is the ping, this is the JPEG, and this is the JPEG that's really low quality. However, get up close and we can definitely tell a difference. So I'm going to open each one in GIMP so that we can zoom in tightly on them. Open with GIMP. Why did I put test image 2 down here? All right, so there's, of course, it put them in a weird order. All right, here's number 1. All right, so this is our ping. As you see up here, it says test image 1. It doesn't say that it's a ping, but I assure you that it is. But I want you to notice, well, it may be hard for you to see, but up here at the top, it says it's 3,715 pixels by 55,588 pixels. And if I click on these other two, that doesn't change. Right? So they are all the same size. But the ping, let me zoom in on the ping. Is this the ping? No, this is the one I want. Zoom in tightly on something. Let's say on this eye right here. And then JPEG. Now there's already starting to be some things that look different here. It's a little hard to tell up there. Let's see how much of a difference we can see from here to here. Let me zoom in a little tighter. All right. Let me see if I can. Wow, because that eye is so dark in that image, it's hard to see what's happening. Let me see if I can get a better look at the. On my screen, I can see the way that these are looking very different from one another. Up there, you can't see so much. All right, let me see if I can get to a lighter area of it. Where we can maybe see some of the differences that are going to be happening. All right, so let's see, where's the particular one that I'm looking at there? All right, here's my ping. All right, now this is out of focus because of the way that I took the photograph. I wanted the face to be sharply in focus and anything else to go out of focus. So that's why this is blurry. But can you see? Because boy, I can on my screen here. Of course, I've got this hooked up. Can you see the blockiness that's starting to happen here and here? Let me see if I zoom in tightly on it, if it starts to show. All right, do you see how there are like big squares of pixels divided off like this? All right. That's because this entire square was probably something that got removed because the program decided like all that right there could be removed. We wouldn't notice it, and then the program opening it had to fill it in. And on my screen, it's a little less noticeable up there. But in my screen, it's filled it in with some funky greenness happening in here. But if I zoom in on that same area in here, I don't get that, right? Oh, I get individual pixels. If I keep zooming in, I don't get that happening at all. Whereas here, see these chunks that start to happen? But again, from a distance, you don't notice that at all. Now, let's get to our one that's like really jacked up. I say really jacked up. If I get up here into this white area, you see all that starting to happen up there? Those are what are called artifacts. Artifacts are little areas where so many times that image has been opened and so many times that program has had to guess what to put back in it that it starts to make mistakes. And it does weird stuff like that right there. Let me see if I can get into the the area of the necklace where we were. I mean, look at that. Look at all those big chunks going on. All right. Versus this. Let me see if I can get the same magnification. That's 1600, 1100, 1600. All right. So at 1600, there's what I get on my ping. That's what I'm getting in this image. Right? This is the JPEG, but it's the same size. Right? 3,715 pixels by 5,588 pixels. Same for all of them. Let me zoom this one into 1600. But there's this huge difference in the quality between that, which is my ping, to that, which is the JPEG that's just a JPEG, right? Nothing other than just saving it as a JPEG happened here. And this one that's really been through the ringer, right? Now, let's look at the difference in their sizes. File format wise, the amount of space they take up on the disk that they're on. Here's the first one, right? Test image. Oh, it's hard to see, so I'll let you know. It's almost 18 megabytes. That's the ping. The reduction then from that to image number 2, where all I'm doing is just dropping it down to and saving it as a JPEG. It goes from 18 megabytes to not even 1. It's 892 kilobytes. And then opening it, closing it, opening it, closing it, compressing it over and over again. That really poor quality one gets down all the way to 364 kilobytes. Less than half of the original JPEG. And just taking the original image, the ping image, and saving it as a JPEG got me down to like 1/18th, less than 1/18th of the file size of the ping. That's why we can have the internet that we have now. Because the internet can have really good-looking images, really good-looking video that's been compressed in such a way as to take up only that small amount of space. But again, if I send this, not this one, let's say I send this one here, with all that weird wonkiness that's happening up there, right? I send that to a printer, and I need to get this photograph printed really large. All that stuff is going to become visible on that. So this is perfectly fine for, say, if I'm uploading it to a website, fine, no problem. This is going to look great, and my website will load very quickly because it doesn't have to load a whole bunch of data to get this image. But if I'm going to send something off that I want to look nice and professional, I'm going to go for a ping. Because my ping, I go up in that same area, and I don't have any of that weirdness up there. Right? So when this prints, it's going to look good as a result. So most of your cameras already produce a JPEG image. But it's a high quality JPEG, so the first time you open it up in GIMP, that's the best it's going to ever look. So what I suggest is that after you've done your edits, if you really like what you have, go ahead and save it as a ping real quick. But if you don't want to be sitting around waiting for a long time for your photos to upload for the assignment, also save it as a JPEG and then upload the JPEG to your blog. All right? Does that make sense? That's if you really like the photo. You're like, man, I like that, and I don't ever want it to lose its quality. Let me just save a ping real quick to be on the safe side. All right? Questions about this stuff at all? If you have, here's one way that you can very quickly see artifacts in something if you ever want to try, is try to watch something that was originally a standard def video on a nice high quality HD TV. Because it's not only does it have an image that was compressed and smaller, but it's having to expand that to make it fit on a high def screen. So it's even having to guess about more pixels. And you'll see sometimes those images will look just fine, and then somebody will move, and there'll be like some weird trail of funky looking pixels that follows after that person when they move. Those are those artifacts because your whatever program is running in whatever streaming service you have, or your DVD player is trying to figure out how to fill in all those gaps. And it makes really weird mistakes sometimes.